uh, with the continuation of the yesterday session. Yesterday, we have talked about why we need ETL and why we need data stage. So that's what we discussed, and like what kind of things that we take care as part of the data stage, like different ETL operations, right? That also we have discussed on the yesterday session. So after that, we had a discussion of like high-level bullet points that we have within this data stage, like what kind of clients we have, and different operations that we do on different clients. So that is what was discussed. Now we need to get into the architecture of the architecture of the data stage. So where this particular data stage follows what? Service oriented architecture. But when it comes to the what we call internal part of specific to the data stage, it is a simple client server architecture. So it's not complex at all. It is very simple. And now let us try to understand what are all the different clients that we have, and what other layers that we have, and how are we going to perform different data stage activities. So let us try to understand that. So in this particular architecture of data stage, we can see two broader layers. One is a client layer, and second is going to be the server layer. So in the client layer, we have what? Data stage designer, data stage director, data stage administrator. So these are the three broader thick clients, which means what? Standalone applications that we have within this data stage. So I repeat, we have three important thick clients, namely data stage designer, data stage director, data stage administrator. So these are the three clients that we have within this data stage. Now there is one more client which we call web console or admin console. So there's a question here, what is a thick layer? Thick layer means what? Thick client. Thick client means what? It is a client that needs external application to install it, or we need standalone application to install it. That's where thick client would come in. So another client is what? Thin client, which is what? Web console, where we don't need to install anything. Instead, we just apply a URL and get the what we call services. So but here, in order to perform any data stage activities, we have to install this, but for admin console it is not required. So admin console is going to be the thin client, and this designer, director, administrator, these are all what? Thick clients, which needs what? Installation of each and every client. Now this client was there is another client, repository manager or data stage manager, in pre 8.x versions of data quality, in pre 8.x versions of data stage. Now from 8.0 onwards, we don't have this particular client. So we have what? Only three thick clients: designer, director, and administrator. Now the next is what we have a server which will be used in order to what service the request that we are going to receive from one of these clients or from more than one of these clients. Yeah. So that's where datastage server will be used for. Yeah. And repository is another layer where we are going to use this layer in order to store the metadata elements. For example, let us say you have created a table. Yeah? Now, where are we going to store that particular table? Yeah? So that's where what this particular repository will be used for, where we can use this repository to store metadata only. Remember, I repeat, we use this repository in order to what store the metadata only. Yeah. For example, tables, views, names, triggers, SPs, or any other data stage activities that we do, right? Like a job sequences, and shared containers, and so on. So all of them are what? Metadata elements, and those elements will be stored within the repository. For now, you can just remember, if you create a table here, that will be stored here. Simple. Just remember that. Yeah? Now there is a one more layer, which is what we call engine layer. I repeat, there is a one more layer which we call the engine layer. Yeah? So, which is going to be the core part of data stage, because engine layer what will take the responsibility of processing the actual data. For example, let us say we get 1 million records from the source. Now we need to get it processed in short span of time. Who is going to service that? Engine. Remember. So especially we use what? Parallel engine, through which we could able to process the very large data in short span of time. That's it. Yeah. And this particular server and engine can be deployed or can be installed under Windows Server or under Unix Server. I repeat, this particular what data stage server and data stage parallel engine can be deployed under what Windows Server or under Unix Server. Yeah. So which means initially when this product was built, right, so data stage can be deployed under what Unix servers. Yeah. When it was built initially. Now if you look at this, what it called current market, this guy, which means what? Data stage can be installed under Unix platforms and also under what Windows platforms. Yeah? But most of the customers, they are into what Unix platforms. Yeah? So that's where what this particular what it call environment will be used for. Yeah? So fine. So once we understand this, then the next step is what we need to start understanding different flow of activities that happens from top to bottom. Yeah? So now let us try to get into the details of each client. For example, let us take a designer client which will be used in order to design and develop data stage jobs. Now repeat, let us try to understand the designer client, yeah, which will be used in order to what perform this what design and development of data stage jobs. And designer client will be used by whom? Developers. Just remember that. I repeat, designer client will be used by whom? Data stage developers. Yeah. Now, the next thing is going to be what we have another client, which is going to be the director client. So director client will be used in order to what run, schedule and monitor the data stage jobs. I repeat, director client will be used in order to run, schedule and monitor the data stage jobs. Yeah. So that's where the director client will be used for, right? So for example, let's say we create a data stage job by using designer client, but how are we going to execute in order to process the data? So that's where we need to start getting into the another client, which is going to be the data stage director client to take care of that. And which means what? We can use this to run, schedule and monitor data stage jobs. Yeah. And third client is going to be what? The administrator client, which will be used in order to set the global properties. I repeat, this administrator client will be used in order to set the global properties. For example, creation of users or set some global value, which is what? Path equal to this much, and this particular path can be used in any number of jobs. There are the two examples where we could achieve them by using what? Data stage administrator client, right? Now, and other client is basically this particular client features have been merged with the data stage designer. And what is the main purpose of this particular client? So we use this in order to perform different repository operations. I repeat, we use this particular client in order to perform what? The different repository operations, like for example, create metadata, which means to create a table, create any meta activities, right? All of them will be done here. Not only creation, we can also modify, we can also delete, we can perform any metadata operations. So all of them will be taken care by using this. Plus, we can also use this in order to take care of migration from one environment to other environment. For example, let us say we have what built data stage activities in the development environment, which need to be made available in other environments, like we have what? Testing environment or production environment. How do you do that? We need to make use of this particular repository manager to take care of that. Yeah? Which means what? Export from dev to XML, import from XML to testing environment. That's it. A simple example. Yeah? Like how the export and import works over here, right? Now, these are the individual clients. There's a one more client which I was trying to talk, which is going to be what? Admin console or web console, which is going to be the thin client or web client, you can say. You know? So which will be used in order to perform different admin activities, like creation of users, creation of groups, creation of roles, and then assign what? Assign group to a role, group to a role, or user to a role, and so on. You know? So which means what? We can perform different security operations within this admin console. Plus, we can also use this in order to monitor the activities. I repeat, we can also use this in order to monitor the activities that we do within the data stage. I repeat, we can also use this web client in order to monitor the activities that we do within the data stage. Yeah. So which means what? All centralized operations will be taken care by using admin console, which means what? Let us say from the designer you have done something, or from the director you have done something, from let's say admin, which is what the client, you have done something. So where do you keep track of all these activities that are done in different clients? That's where admin console, where we have centralized monitoring features. So where we can monitor the activities of each and every activity that happens within the data stage. Yeah. So this is one of the primary reason why simple client server architecture converted to SOA architecture, which is service oriented architecture. Remember that. Yeah? I repeat, in order to monitor the activities in a central location, then we need to convert this simple client server architecture to service oriented architecture. Yeah? So which is what we could able to see in this particular data stage. So which means what? Less than, or let us say pre 8.0 onwards, we follow simple client server architecture. So which because when this product was with Essential, yeah, there is a separate company where this product was there. So that time they used to follow simple client server. So after acquisition, which means IBM bought Essential, which means what? After 8.0 versions, yeah, which is from 8.0 version onwards, data stage follows what? SOA architecture. So this is part of IBM. Yeah? Clear, right? So we have different versions, like right from 3 to 7.5.3. So till this versions, this guy data stage follows simple client server architecture. From 8.0 onwards, data stage follows what? Service oriented architecture, which means what? That's where introducing this particular another client, which is what I call admin console, came in. Clear, right? So that's what we could able to see within this architectural change from pre 8.x against with what? Current versions from 8.0 to till the latest version of data stage. We follow what? Service oriented architecture. Yeah, fine. So which means, so in order to bring up this, there are different core services which anyway we are going to talk, like administration service, security service, authentication service, authorization service, all of them. So we need to bring those things in order to log on to this. Once you log in, then only we can start getting into these clients, which means what? Everything happens through what? Admin console. Remember. So which means what? Things have been centralized. That's why we call this as what? This data stage follows what? Centralized architecture or service oriented architecture. That's it. Yeah? So that's about the different clients. Now we know what are the clients that we have. One, admin console, designer, director, administrator, optionally repository manager. These are what? Graphical user interface clients. I repeat, these are all what? Graphical user interface clients. right? Now, once we know that, so which means once we understand this GUI clients, then we also have what command line clients. I repeat, we also have command line client, which means what we can run data stage or we can perform the operations of data stage from the command line. Like we have ds job and we have many other commands like osh and so on. So we have different command line utilities which can be used to perform different data stage operations. So broadly there are two types of clients. One, what GUI based client, graphical user interface client, and second command line clients. Command line clients are this, and graphical ones are admin console, designer, director, and then what administrator, and optionally what repository manager. Yeah, so these are the what different clients that we have over here. Yeah, fine. Any questions over here in order to what get into the different what details over here. Yeah, let us start getting into the next what level of this architecture. Yeah? So where we could able to understand the complete flow. Yeah, that's what we need to take a look at now. Yeah, fine. Yeah, so let us start getting into this, which means we are going to understand like how this particular architecture works with respect to what flow wise manner. Yeah, so let us start getting into that. Yeah, so in this particular architecture, so let us say you have created a data stage job. Yeah, then we need to understand what happens when you create this particular data stage job. Yeah, then let us create a job. Once you create it, this particular create job request will be sent to a data stage server. Then output of that will be stored under the repository. I repeat, once you create a job, yeah, so then it will be stored onto the repository. Yeah? That's what happens over here. Yeah, fine. So which means all the requests like whatever we sent from designer, it will be sent to first server. Server is going to take the responsibility to delegate that particular request to a repository or server or engine. Yeah, so in this where we simply perform what simple meta operations, right? So all the meta activities will be taken care by the repository where we are going to store, yeah, in this particular what this particular service, which is repository service, which will take care of storing the data onto the repository. Once it is done, you will get a response to the server, then onto the requester, where we could able to see what this particular result, whether this particular job has been created successfully or not. Yeah, fine. So now the next is what, let us say we are going to perform what run job or run data stage job. Then what happens, this particular run request will be sent to a data stage server, which in turn will be delegated to what engine. Can you see here? I repeat, director, if we run any job, this request will be sent to what, to data stage server. In turn this request will be delegated to what, a parallel engine. Remember, no? So which means what in order to what take care of different activities of run requests, right? Especially because we'll be processing very large volume of data. So in order to service those large volume of records, then we need to make use of parallel engine. Remember, because when you go with a parallel jobs, by default it is going to make use of parallel engine. So this request, like whatever we get it from here, it will be sent to server, then on the parallel engine, and then service that particular what I call request, which is a large volume of data. Then once it is serviced, you will get a response back to the server, then on to the requester, where you could able to see status of what this particular request. Yeah? So that is what happens with this particular what simple request and response. Fine. Any questions over here? Like how this run request would work. So it will be sent to server. Server is going to what I call delegate its request to parallel engine. Engine is going to service that. Once it is serviced, we'll get a response back to the server, then onto the director, where we could able to see the status of that particular job request. Yeah. So likewise, we also have schedule, monitor, all that. That anyway, we are going to talk when you get into practical examples of the director part. You know. And third client is going to be what administrator client. I repeat, third client is going to be what administrator client, which will be used in order to what perform global activities. For example, let's say you added some your own global property. Then what happens? This request will be sent to this guy, which is server. Then it will be forwarded to a repository where output of that particular property will be stored. Yeah. So that is what we could able to say what as part of this particular example, right, which is storing the data onto the repository. Clear, right? So that's it. Yeah. Now another client is what repository manager. As the name suggests, we use this to perform the repository operations like create metadata. Then this request will be sent to the server. Then the server is going to service that. Output of that will be stored onto the repository. That's it. Yeah. So this is how the request and response would work. Similarly, we have admin console. So where we are going to make use of another layer, which is going to be the application server. Paul, I'll talk about that architecture in detail later. For now, let me just touch upon at high level. So if you send, let's say if you create a user in admin console, then what happens? This request will be sent to web server, then on to application server. So the app server that we use here is what? Web sphere. You know? So our IBM web sphere. Then it is going to look for specific services within this app server, and then get the job done. Then output of that will be sent back to what, because it will be serviced. Then you'll get a response back to app server, then onto console, where we could able to see whether the request has been serviced or not. So there is a one extra layer, which is what I call app server, which will be introduced as part of what taking care of this particular web-based operations. Yeah, fine, clear, right? So that's what happens with this particular admin operations. Yeah, clear, right? So that's it about request and response. Similarly, we have talked about command line clients, right? like a DS job or OSH, orchestrate shell commands or whatever. Yeah. So which will be used in order to what perform different data stage operations from the command line. Like I was trying to talk about DS job OSH, right? Which means we can run data stage jobs from a command line. When you run it again, this is same. It's like it's as good as running from a director. So request will be sent here. It will be serviced by using engine, then got a response, and output of that will be sent from the command itself. So we don't need to get into the director. If you want, you can also get into the director to look at the status. So we can look at the status over here, which is what in the director and also from the command line client. Yeah. So both will be taken care of over here. Clear, right? So that's what happens with respect to what different requests and responses. Any questions over here? Yeah, fine. There is a question here. Is this repository central repository which can be used by all the clients? Yes. So whatever, let's say you created a job, this job can be seen here and also in repository wherever. Because this repository is going to be the central repository. Yeah? So that's what we need to do over here. Yeah? Clear? Now, next thing is going to be what we need to start getting into what high level flows, which means what all these activities, right, like whatever we discussed in the middle section, will be used for what? To read the data from source, apply ETL operations by using a data stage, and transfer data to a target. That's all we do. So which means simple ETL operations we do by using what? Data stage. So that's what we could able to see over here. Clear, right? So now once we understand this, what reading the data and performing ETL operations and transferring data to a target, next step is what we need to get into the what practical sessions, yeah, where I hope the installation is done or this at least extraction is done. So now the next step is what we need to load that software, which is data stage server and client, bring up the client. So it will ask for what username and password when you bring up the client. So we need to specify the host name, username, password, and project. So once you specify, we can log on to what? The clients. So this is going to be the simple way to get started with what? Data stage. Yeah. So we need to specify host name where this data stage server has been installed, and username like whatever we discuss admin console, right, where we create users with the proper privileges. Supply that particular username and then followed by password that you supplied as part of admin console. Then which project where we are going to work on data stage activities. Yeah. So that also we need to what specify over here. That's it. Once we do that, we could log on to what client, and client user interface would look like this. So this is going to be the designer or data stage designer interface, where we can use this to build or to design and develop data stage jobs. Remember, so we are going to spend a lot of time in this particular client because being a developer, right, you know, so or even administrator also, they need to verify different activities. So this is one of the most widely used client by the developers, but less usage from the admin perspective. Yeah. So which means whatever data stage supports, right, all the transformations we can see within this data stage designer, where we are going to use this to perform the different data stage activities. Yeah. Now another client is going to be what we have a director client, which will be used in order to perform what different what operations like run, schedule and monitor. For example, when you create a job in designer, then how are we going to run it? For that we use what? Director. So director, it is going to facilitate us on running, scheduling and monitoring data stage jobs. Can you see here? This is a director where we can see n number of jobs, and each job should have been compiled and kept it ready. Once it is ready, then we can start selection of any job, and can you see here triangle button here, which will be used to execute any job or jobs. That's it. Yeah. So once you execute, there is a tools monitor using which we can also we can monitor each job status, like how many rows that are processed, rows per second that are processed, and then how many rows that are rejected, all that. Yeah. So all of them will be taken care of by using what the data stage director. Yeah. Fine. Now there is one more client which is going to be the manager. Can you see here? Which is not there now. This, but features are there. They are kept as part of designer. So as we discussed earlier, that this manager client will be used to perform the different repository operations like create metadata, yeah, and then modify metadata, export, import, all of them can be taken care by using this. Yeah. And one more client is what? This is very important client for administrators. If you play a role of administrator, then we need to start getting into this particular client, where we have different administrative activities, right from global properties, permissions, tracing, scheduling, tunables, parallel, sequence settings, plus other environment settings. All that will have the under control of administrator. Yeah. So we'll talk about these things in detail. Yeah. So that's it about the clients, and once we understand, there's a question from Gopal. So no manager. Yeah, we don't have any manager client, but we have those features within the designer. Whatever features that we have in manager, right? All of them, they have been integrated with designer itself. Gopal. Yeah, there's one more question here. Um, So how much is effort from developer side? It depends on the project, you know, like how large the requirement that we have. Yeah, fine. Now, yeah, so that's it about this architecture and different clients that we have. So with this, we'll stop for the day and we'll continue from here, which means what? What are the sequential steps that we need to follow in order to perform different activities within the data stage. Yeah? So like where to start and what and all we do and how to look at the results within the data stage. Yeah? So that part we'll get into from tomorrow. So before that, make sure that your setup is all set. Yeah? Fine. So that's all for today. So we'll continue from here tomorrow. Yeah? Thanks to all. Bye. Yeah. Yes, Anish, we can do that. Is it extracted? Select all the files and extract and keep it in one folder, so that we can set it up.